The conference room smelled like cold pizza and desperation. Rebecca Morrison watched the vein in Marcus Chen's temple pulse as he stabbed at his laptop keyboard for the 14th time. On the wall-mounted screen, the same error message blinked in cruel red letters. System critical failure. All services down. "Someone get Dallas on the line," Marcus said, his voice tight. He was 29. The company's lead developer. And right now, he looked like he might cry. "I don't care if it's 2 in the morning there. Wake him up." Beck, everyone called her Beck, though she'd introduced herself as Rebecca on her first day 3 months ago, sat at the far end of the table, her fingers resting on the closed lid of her laptop. She'd already identified the problem. She'd recognized the cascading failure pattern the moment the first alert came through, but she'd learned quickly at NeuroSpark that speaking up too soon only made things worse. "It's the load balancer," someone said. Tyler, maybe, or Jason. She still mixed up the 20-something developers in their identical hoodies. "It's not the fucking load balancer," Marcus snapped. "I already checked." The Austin office of NeuroSpark occupied the 3rd floor of a renovated warehouse in East Austin, all exposed brick and industrial lighting, with a cold brew tap in the kitchen and motivational posters about disruption on the walls. Outside, the November night was unseasonably warm. Inside, the air conditioning blasted at full power, and Beck pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. She was 53. She'd been coding since before most of these kids were born, back when you had to count memory in kilobytes and every line mattered. She'd built systems for banks, hospitals, government agencies. She'd survived Y2K, the dot-com crash, 3 recessions and 2 divorces. And now she worked as a junior developer at a startup that made AI-powered scheduling software, reporting to people who could have been her children. "Maybe we should restart the entire cluster," suggested Amy, the product manager. She was 26 and had never written a line of code in her life, but she had a master's degree in business from Stanford, which apparently qualified her to make technical suggestions. "That'll take 40 minutes minimum," Marcus said. "We're losing $12,000 every minute we're down. Do the math." Beck did the math. $480,000 and counting. NeuroSpark's platform served 1,700 corporate clients across North America. Right now, none of them could access their schedules, their employee rosters, their shift assignments. Tomorrow was Friday, the busiest day of the week for scheduling. If they weren't back online by 6 a.m. Eastern Time, when the first managers started logging in, the company was finished. "Beck!" Marcus finally looked at her, his expression somewhere between annoyance and hope. "You're quiet. Any ideas?" She felt the eyes of the room turn toward her. 7 people. 7 sets of eyes that saw her grey hair first, her competence second, or not at all. During her interview, the VP of Engineering had actually asked her if she was comfortable learning new technologies. She'd listed 32 languages on her resume. "It's the authentication microservice," she said calmly. "The token refresh is creating a race condition with the session handler. Every retry is spawning a new process thread. You're essentially DDoSing yourselves." Marcus stared at her. That's not possible. We tested that module for weeks." "You tested it with synthetic load. Real user behavior is different. When people can't log in, they refresh, over and over, exponential growth." She paused. "It's in the logs if you know where to look. Tyler, or Jason." She really needed to learn which was which. Laughed. Actually laughed. "With all due respect, Beck, I wrote that auth module. There's no way it's—" "Show me the logs," Marcus interrupted. Beck opened her laptop for the first time since the meeting started. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from decades of late nights and crisis management. She pulled up the error logs, filtered by timestamp, traced the cascade pattern backward through 3 layers of microservices. "There," she said, turning the screen so Marcus could see. First failure at 22, 47, 33. Authentication timeout. Then session handler crashes trying to clean up orphan tokens. Then the database connection pool exhausts because nothing's releasing its locks. Classic cascade. The room was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic on East 6th Street. Marcus's face went through several expressions: disbelief, realization, horror, and finally something that might have been respect. How long did that take you? About 90 seconds, Beck said. The pattern's pretty obvious once you know what to look for. Can you fix it? Beck looked at her watch. 11:18 p.m. Her daughter Emily was home from college for the week, sleeping in her old bedroom. Beck had promised to make breakfast together in the morning like they used to when Emily was little, before the divorce, before Beck's career had consumed everything else. Yes, she said, but I need everyone to stop touching the system. No more restarts, no more diagnostic queries, nothing. You're making it worse. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, everyone out. Beck, you've got the room, whatever you need. The others filed out, some reluctant, some clearly relieved to escape. Tyler, she was now certain it was Tyler, shot her a look that she couldn't quite read. Skepticism mixed with wounded pride, maybe. When the door closed, Beck pulled her chair closer to the table and cracked her knuckles. The office was quiet now, just the ambient hum of servers and HVAC systems. Through the window she could see the lights of downtown Austin, the new high-rises changing the skyline every year. She'd moved here in 2019 after the divorce, after her layoff from IBM, when they decided to restructure toward a younger, more dynamic workforce. That was the phrase they'd used. She'd hired a lawyer, but in the end, she'd taken the severance and signed the NDA. Fighting cost money and energy she didn't have. Neurospark had been her 9th application. The first 8 hadn't even called her back. She'd finally removed her graduation year from her resume, shortened her work history to the last 10 years, and updated her profile photo to something more recent. Even then, she could see the surprise in the interviewer's eyes when she walked in. They'd expected someone younger. She SSH'd into the production environment and started working. The fix wasn't complicated. A rate limiter on the authentication endpoint, a circuit breaker to prevent cascade failures, and a cleanup script to kill the orphaned processes. 30 minutes of work, maybe 40. But she took her time, documented every change, added comments to the code. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. When you're the oldest person in the room, you can't just be right. You have to be meticulous, unimpeachable. At 11:52 p.m., she deployed the fix. At 11:54, the error messages stopped. At 11:56, the health checks turned green. By midnight, all systems were operational. Beck saved her work, pushed the changes to the repository, and wrote a post-mortem in the incident channel on Slack. She kept it brief, factual, free of blame. Then she closed her laptop and walked out of the conference room. The office was empty now, except for Marcus, who sat at his desk, staring at his monitor. When he saw her, he stood up. "You saved us," he said simply. Beck shrugged. "Just doing my job." That was. I've never seen anyone diagnose a problem that fast. How did you even... He trailed off, shaking his head. "Experience," Beck said. "I've seen variations of this failure mode about a dozen times. Different systems, same pattern. Once you've been around long enough, you start recognizing the shapes." Marcus looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Finally, he settled on, "Thank you, really. I'll make sure David knows what you did here tonight." David was the CTO, a 34-year-old Stanford dropout who'd made $20 million on his last startup and spoke at conferences about disrupting the future of work. Beck had met him exactly once, during her onboarding. He'd called her kiddo and talked over her for 15 minutes before getting called away to a more important meeting. "Sure," Beck said. "I'm heading home. Big day tomorrow." "Right, yeah. Get some rest." Beck walked to the parking garage, her laptop bag heavy on her shoulder. Her Honda Civic, 12 years old but still running, sat in the corner spot she always chose, away from the Tesla and BMWs the younger employees drove. The November air was thick and warm, carrying the smell of barbecue from the food trucks on East 6th and the faint sound of live music from the bars. She sat in her car for a moment before starting the engine, letting the day wash over her. 3 months at NeuroSpark. 3 months of being the oldest person in every meeting, of watching younger developers present her ideas as their own, of having her suggestions questioned until a man repeated them verbatim and received praise. 3 months of being hired as a diversity checkbox. Older worker. Woman in tech, 2 birds with 1 stone, and then quietly sidelined on maintenance tasks and bug fixes. And yet tonight, when everything fell apart, they'd needed her. For 90 seconds, her experience had mattered more than her age. She started the car and headed home, west on Cesar Chavez, toward her apartment in South Austin. The city lights blurred past her window. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered if anything would actually change after tonight, if they'd finally see her as something more than the old lady who wrote good documentation. Probably not, she thought. But for tonight, she'd saved the day. That was something. When she got home, Emily was still up, sprawled on the couch with her laptop, studying for finals. She looked up when Beck walked in. "How was work?" "Long," Beck said, "but good. I think I might have impressed them." Emily smiled. "Of course you did, Mom. You're brilliant." Beck kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Get some sleep. We're making pancakes in the morning. Extra chocolate chips." Obviously. Beck went to bed but couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the moment when Marcus had looked at her screen, the shift in his expression when he realized she was right. The silence in the room, the brief, shining instant when her competence had been undeniable. She wondered how long it would last. Beck woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window and the smell of coffee brewing. For a confused moment, she thought Emily had started breakfast without her, but then she remembered setting the timer on the coffee maker the night before. Old habit from her IBM days, when she'd had to be at the office by 7. She checked her phone. 8:47 a.m. 16. Slack messages, 7 emails, 2 missed calls. Her heart sank as she opened the notifications, bracing for news that her fix had broken something else, that she'd missed a critical edge case, But the messages were congratulatory. Apparently David, the CTO, had sent an all-hands email at 7 this morning, praising the team's quick response to last night's crisis. Beck scrolled through until she found it. "Thanks to the incredible work of our engineering team, led by Marcus Chen, we recovered from last night's system failure in record time. This is exactly the kind of innovative problem-solving and technical excellence that makes NeuroSpark great. Special recognition to Marcus for his leadership under pressure." Beck read it twice, then a third time. Her name wasn't mentioned, not once. She set the phone face down on her nightstand and stared at the ceiling. The anger came slowly, building from a distant simmer to something hotter, sharper. She'd expected this. Some part of her had known it would happen, but expectation didn't dull the sting. Emily knocked on her door. "Mom, you awake?" "I'm starving." Beck forced a smile and pulled on her robe. "Pancakes coming right up." They cooked together in the small kitchen. Emily chattering about her economics final, and her roommate drama, and whether she should apply for a summer internship in New York or stay in Austin. Beck listened and flipped pancakes and tried to focus on this moment, her daughter's laugh, the ordinary grace of a Friday morning, but part of her mind was already composing the email she would send to HR. The carefully worded message explaining that her contribution had been overlooked, that this was part of a pattern, that she'd documented 6 similar incidents over the past 3 months. She'd be professional, unemotional, factual. And then HR would forward it to David, and David would tell Marcus, and everyone would know she'd complained. She'd be the difficult older woman who couldn't be a team player. "Mom, you're burning the pancake," Emily said. Beck rescued the pancake and slid it onto the pile. "Sorry. Distracted." "Work stuff?" "Yeah." Emily gave her a knowing look. She'd heard enough stories over the years, from IBM and the companies before that. "They don't appreciate you there, do they?" "It's complicated." "It's not complicated. You're smarter than all of them, and they can't handle it because you're over 30 and female." Emily spoke with the casual certainty of 20-year-olds who've taken a few sociology classes and believe they've decoded the world. But she wasn't wrong. "I'm over 50, honey. Big difference. Even worse. Tech industry is so fucking ageist." Emily caught herself. "Sorry, I know you don't like when I swear at breakfast." Beck laughed despite herself. "It's fine. You're not wrong." They ate pancakes with too many chocolate chips and talked about easier things. And for a little while, Beck let herself forget about the email and Marcus and the recognition she wouldn't get. But when Emily left for a study group at 11, Beck was alone with her laptop and her anger. She opened her email and started typing. She got as far as, "I'm writing to document a concern regarding last night's incident response," before she stopped. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could see exactly how this would play out. HR would schedule a meeting. David would explain that the email was about recognizing team leadership, not individual contributions. Marcus would apologize privately, but do nothing publicly. The other developers would hear that she'd complained about not getting credit, and she'd become that person. Bitter, entitled, unable to accept that leadership meant taking responsibility for the team. She'd seen this movie before. She knew how it ended. Beck closed the laptop without sending the email. Instead, she went for a run. The day was hot already, typical for Austin even in November, and she stuck to the shaded paths along Lady Bird Lake. Other runners passed her, younger, faster, wearing expensive performance gear and wireless earbuds. Beck had an old iPhone armband and shoes she'd bought on clearance at Target. She ran at her own pace, steady and sustainable, the way she'd learned to do everything in her 50s. By the time she got back to her apartment, sweating and tired, she'd made her decision. She would go to work on Monday like nothing had happened. She would be professional, pleasant, helpful. She would document her work meticulously and wait for the next crisis, because there would be a next crisis, there always was. And when it came, she'd be ready. The weekend passed slowly. Saturday, she helped Emily study for her economics final, testing her on supply curves and price elasticity while they sat on the balcony drinking iced tea. Sunday, Emily drove back to campus in San Marcos, and Beck spent the afternoon cleaning her apartment and avoiding social media, where everyone seemed to be either younger, happier, or both. Monday morning came too soon. Beck arrived at the office at 8:30, earlier than usual, and found the engineering bullpen already buzzing. There was cake in the kitchen, someone's birthday, and the energy felt different, looser. People were laughing. Marcus saw her and waved her over to his desk. "Beck, there you are. Hey, listen, I wanted to thank you again for Friday night. That was seriously impressive." "Just doing my job," Beck said neutrally. "I know David's email didn't mention you specifically, but he just wanted to highlight the team leadership aspect, you know. But I made sure to tell everyone internally what you did. Tyler knows, Amy knows, they all know." Beck nodded. "Private credit, invisible credit. The kind that wouldn't appear on her performance review, or affect her salary, or prevent her from being the first person laid off if the company had a bad quarter." "Great," she said. "Glad I could help. Actually, I wanted to ask you something." Marcus lowered his voice. We've got this legacy integration with one of our biggest clients, a hospital network in Chicago. The code's a mess, and it keeps breaking in weird ways. None of us can figure it out. Would you take a look? I know it's not the most exciting work, but— Sure, Beck interrupted. She knew what he was going to say. It's not the most exciting work, but you're good at this kind of thing. Translation: we need someone patient enough to untangle old, badly written code, and you're the only one who won't complain. Awesome. I'll send you the repository link. Fair warning, it's pretty gnarly. Been in production since 2019. Beck spent the rest of Monday afternoon wading through 5,000 lines of undocumented code written by developers who'd apparently never heard of naming conventions or comments. It was exactly the kind of tedious, unglamorous work that was somehow always assigned to her. The senior developers, none of whom were actually senior by any measure except self-identification, got to work on the new AI features and the mobile app redesign. Beck got the maintenance work, the bug fixes, the legacy integrations. By Wednesday, she'd fixed the hospital integration and documented the entire codebase. By Thursday, she'd optimized the database queries and reduced the average response time by 40%. She submitted her pull request with detailed notes and moved on to the next maintenance ticket. At the Friday all-hands meeting, David mentioned the hospital integration in his opening remarks. Big shout-out to Marcus and the infrastructure team for stabilizing our Chicago deployment. The clients thrilled with the performance improvements. Beck listened from the back of the room and said nothing. That evening, she stayed late to finish a security audit, not because anyone had asked her to, but because she'd noticed several vulnerabilities in the authentication system and couldn't sleep knowing they were there. She was still at her desk at 7 p.m. when Tyler walked past, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. "You're here late," he said. It wasn't quite a question, just wrapping up some stuff. Tyler hesitated, then pulled up a chair. "Listen, I wanted to say I was wrong. About the auth module, you were right, and I was defensive about it." He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "I'm not used to being wrong about code." Beck studied him. He was 27, talented, cocky in the way young developers often were when they'd never encountered a problem they couldn't solve with enough time and Red Bull. She'd been like that once, a lifetime ago. "It happens," she said. "No one writes perfect code the first time." "Yeah, but you figured it out in 90 seconds, that was—" He trailed off. "How long have you been doing this?" 28 years. Tyler's eyes widened. "Seriously." "Started when I was 25. I'm 53 now. Do the math." "Damn, I mean—" He caught himself. "That's impressive. You must have seen a lot." Beck smiled tightly. "I've seen every flavor of system failure there is. After a while, they all start to look familiar." "So, why are you here? I mean, no offense. But with your experience, you could be like a senior architect somewhere, or consulting, or retired." Beck finished. "I tried that. Lasted 3 months. Turns out I'm not very good at leisure." That was partly true. The fuller truth was that she'd been laid off, not retired, and at 51 with a resume gap. She discovered that most companies saw experienced as a euphemism for expensive and outdated. Neurospark had hired her because they were desperate for anyone who could maintain their legacy systems, and because they could pay her junior-level wages. Tyler looked like he wanted to say something else, but his phone buzzed. "That's my Uber. I'm meeting some friends at a bar on Rainey Street. You should come." Beck glanced at her screen, at the half-finished security audit. "I appreciate the invitation, but I've got a bit more work to finish." "Come on, it's Friday night. The work will be there Monday." "I know, but I want to get this done." Tyler shrugged. "Suit yourself. See you Monday." After he left, Beck sat in the empty office and finished her audit. She compiled her findings into a report with recommendations and emailed it to Marcus. Then she drove home through the Friday night traffic past the bars and restaurants full of young professionals laughing and drinking, past the food trucks and the live music venues, past all the Austin energy and vibrancy that she was somehow adjacent to but never quite part of. Her apartment was quiet when she got home. She made dinner, pasta with vegetables, nothing fancy, and ate while watching a documentary about the Apollo program. When it finished, she opened her laptop and checked her email. Nothing from Marcus about the security audit, nothing about the hospital integration. Just an automated reminder about next quarter's performance reviews and a calendar invite for another all-hands meeting. Beck closed the laptop and went to bed early, and this time she didn't have trouble sleeping. She'd stopped expecting recognition weeks ago. The only thing that surprised her now was that some small part of her still hoped for it. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in early December, when Beck arrived at the office to find the entire engineering team clustered around Marcus's desk. The air had that particular charge that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. "What happened?" she asked Amy, who stood on the edge of the group. "Database migration went sideways. We lost about 2 hours of customer data from last night." Beck's stomach dropped. "Lost as in corrupted, or lost as in gone?" "Gone. No backups for that window. Marcus is trying to figure out what happened." Beck pushed through the crowd. On Marcus's screen, she could see the post-mortem logs from the migration script. She scanned the timestamps, the error messages, the cascade of failures. It took her less than a minute to see the problem. "The backup job failed," she said quietly. Marcus looked up, his face pale. "What?" "The incremental backup. It failed at 8:47 p.m. yesterday. Then the migration ran at 10:00 p.m. And when it hit the schema conflict, it rolled back. But without a clean backup, the rollback corrupted the data." Marcus stared at his screen like he was seeing it for the first time. "How did I miss that?" "The alert probably went to the monitoring channel. Did anyone check it?" Silence. Beck already knew the answer. The monitoring channel was flooded with false positives, had been for months, and everyone had muted it. "Can we recover the data?" someone asked. "Maybe," Beck said, "if we can find a replica that hasn't been synchronized yet, or restore from yesterday's full backup and replay the transactions." "That'll take hours," Marcus said. "The clients are already calling. We've got about," he checked his watch, 30 minutes before this becomes a PR nightmare." Beck felt the weight of every eye in the room. This was the moment where she could either help or walk away. The smart move was to walk away. This wasn't her mistake, wasn't her responsibility. She was the junior developer, remember, the one who got assigned maintenance work and legacy integrations. But she'd never been good at the smart move. "Give me access to the production database," she said, "and tell everyone to stop touching anything." She worked in a conference room with the door closed, Marcus hovering behind her like a nervous parent. The recovery was delicate, painstaking work, identifying exactly which records had been lost, cross-referencing with the application logs, manually reconstructing the transactions. 90 minutes in, her eyes were burning and her shoulders ached, but she was making progress. "You're a miracle worker," Marcus said softly. "I'm a database administrator with 28 years of experience," Beck corrected. "This is just knowing the tools." By 1:00 p.m., she'd recovered 97% of the lost data. The remaining 3%, mostly draft records that users had saved but not submitted, was probably gone forever. But it was acceptable loss. Marcus sent an update to the client success team, and Beck could hear the collective exhale of relief from the bullpen. "I owe you," Marcus said. "Again." "You could put my name in David's next email," Beck said. She meant it as a joke, but it came out sharper than she'd intended. Marcus's expression shifted uncomfortably. "Beck, I know the credit thing has been... I'll talk to David. I promise. Don't worry about it." She went back to her desk and tried to focus on her normal work, but the adrenaline from the recovery had left her jittery and unfocused. Around 3:00 p.m., she went to the kitchen to make tea and found Tyler and two other developers clustered around the cold brew tap. "Heard you saved us again," Tyler said. "It was a team effort," Beck said automatically. "Come on, don't be modest. Marcus was freaking out. You walked in and fixed it like it was nothing." One of the other developers, Sarah maybe, Beck still struggled with names, laughed. "I wish I had half Beck's database knowledge. I barely know SQL. You should teach a workshop or something," Tyler suggested, "like a lunch and learn about database recovery." Beck smiled politely. Maybe. She knew it would never happen. They'd suggested similar things before, having her train the team, document best practices, create knowledge-sharing sessions. But it never materialized because the other developers were always too busy with their exciting new features, and Beck's expertise was only valued during emergencies. She took her tea back to her desk and spent the rest of the afternoon on a bug ticket that had been sitting unassigned for 3 weeks. At 6:00 p.m., her phone rang. Emily. "Hey, honey," Beck answered. "What's up?" "Just calling to see if you're free Saturday. I want to come home for the weekend. Maybe we can do something fun." "Of course. What were you thinking?" "I don't know. Maybe that Vietnamese place you like, or we could go to that art museum you've been talking about." Beck felt a warmth spread through her chest. Emily was 20 and busy with her own life, but she still made time for her mother. "Both sound perfect. I'll pick you up Saturday morning." They chatted for a few more minutes, and when Beck hung up, she felt lighter than she had all day. She closed her laptop and headed for the parking garage. She was halfway to her car when she heard footsteps behind her. "Beck, wait up!" She turned to find Marcus jogging toward her, slightly out of breath. "What's going on?" she asked. "I just got off the phone with David. He wants to have a meeting with you tomorrow at 10. Beck's good mood evaporated. "What about?" "He didn't say. Just said he wanted to talk." Marcus hesitated. "I think it's good news. I really talked you up. Told him about today, about the Friday night thing, all of it." "Okay," Beck said slowly. "Thanks for the heads up." She drove home with an uneasy feeling in her stomach. In her experience, surprise meetings with executives were never good news. But maybe Marcus was right. Maybe this was finally the recognition she'd earned, or maybe they were letting her go. She spent the evening trying not to think about it, watching cooking shows and answering Emily's texts about weekend plans. But when she went to bed, sleep was elusive. She kept imagining the meeting, David's face, the careful corporate language they used when they were about to ruin your life. Wednesday morning, Beck arrived at the office 15 minutes early and went straight to the restroom to check her reflection. She'd dressed more carefully than usual. A nice blouse, pressed slacks, her good shoes. Professional but not desperate. She washed her hands twice and gave herself a pep talk in the mirror. At 9:58, she knocked on David's office door. "Come in." David sat behind a massive desk that seemed deliberately designed to make visitors feel small. He was wearing a hoodie, this one probably cost $300, and sneakers without socks. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin and the river beyond. "Beck, thanks for coming. Have a seat." Beck sat. "Marcus said you wanted to talk." "Yeah. I wanted to touch base about the last couple weeks. Marcus has been telling me about your contributions, and I have to say, I'm impressed." Beck waited. There was a but coming. She could feel it. "You clearly have a lot of technical depth," David continued. "Your experience really shines in crisis situations. Yesterday's recovery was really solid work." "Thank you. That said, I've been looking at the team composition, and I think we need to have a frank conversation about fit." There it was. "Fit?" Beck repeated. "Look, you're talented. And I mean that genuinely. But Neurospark is a startup. We move fast, we iterate, we're not afraid to break things. And I get the sense that you're more comfortable with established systems, with proven approaches, which is valuable, don't get me wrong, but it's not always aligned with our culture. Beck forced herself to speak calmly. Can you give me an example? Sure. Like when we have brainstorming sessions, you tend to focus on why something might not work, instead of exploring the possibilities. You're risk-averse, which again comes from experience, I get it. But it can be a drag on the team's energy. You mean I prevent people from implementing bad ideas, Beck said. David's smile tightened. I mean, you're not always open to innovation. Beck took a breath. She could feel the anger building, hot and dangerous, and she knew she had to control it. Angry women were dismissed as emotional. Angry older women were dismissed as bitter. David. I've saved this company twice in the last 3 weeks. I fixed a critical system failure in less than 2 hours. I recovered lost data that would have cost you clients and probably a lawsuit. I've documented vulnerabilities, optimized systems, and trained other developers. What exactly is the problem with my fit? It's not about your technical skills. Then what is it about? David leaned back in his chair, and Beck saw something flicker across his face. Discomfort, maybe even guilt. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Some of the team have expressed concerns that there's a dynamic where you can come across as condescending, like you're talking down to them because you've been doing this longer. Beck stared at him. Who said that? I can't share specific feedback, but it's been a consistent theme. Was it Tyler, Sarah, Marcus? Beck, because I'm trying to understand what I did wrong. I helped them. I taught them. I fixed their mistakes without blaming them. I stayed late to finish their security audits. What part of that was condescending? It's not what you did. It's how you did it. The tone. David waved his hand vaguely. The whole vibe. And there it was, the real problem. Not her technical skills, not her contributions, not even her mistakes. Her vibe, her tone, the fact that she was older, female, and refused to apologize for knowing more than they did. So what happens now? Beck asked. I think we should transition you to a different role, something more aligned with your strengths. We've got a position opening up in technical documentation. No, Beck interrupted. No, I'm not interested in technical documentation. I'm a software engineer. David's expression hardened. I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. The solution is to acknowledge my work and let me do my job. Beck, I don't think you're hearing me. This isn't really optional. Either you take the documentation role, or we need to discuss whether this is the right place for you. The silence stretched between them. Beck could hear the blood rushing in her ears, could feel the decades of accumulated frustration pressing against her chest. Every dismissal, every time she'd been talked over, every younger man who'd taken credit for her ideas, every job interview where they'd looked at her grey hair and decided she wasn't dynamic enough. When do you need an answer? She asked quietly. End of the week. Beck stood. Then I'll let you know by Friday. She walked out of David's office with her head high and her hands steady, and she made it all the way to the parking garage before she started crying. Beck sat in her car for 20 minutes, letting the tears come. Not because she was sad, she was furious, but because sometimes crying was the only way to release the pressure before it exploded. When she was done, she checked her face in the rearview mirror, wiped away the mascara, and drove home. She couldn't stay at the office, not today, not after that. Her apartment felt too small and too quiet. Beck changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a t-shirt and went back out, driving without destination. She ended up at Zilker Park, walking the trails along the river. It was a Wednesday afternoon in early December, unseasonably warm, And the park was mostly empty except for a few runners and people walking dogs. She found a bench overlooking the water and sat down to think. Technical documentation. They wanted to put her in technical documentation, which was code for removing her from any meaningful work and making her invisible until they could quietly let her go during the next round of layoffs. She'd seen it happen before, at IBM, and before that, at Dell. The pattern was always the same. Older workers got shuffled into advisory roles or knowledge management positions where they couldn't do any harm or claim any credit, and then when budget cuts came, those positions were always first to go. Beck pulled out her phone and opened LinkedIn. She'd kept her profile updated, more out of habit than hope. 53 years old, 28 years of experience, expert in systems architecture, database management, crisis response. On paper, she was exactly what most companies claimed to want. In practice, she was exactly what they avoided hiring. She could fight David's decision. She could go to HR, document the pattern of discrimination, maybe even hire a lawyer. She had emails, Slack messages, a clear trail showing how her contributions had been minimized while younger male colleagues received credit. She might even win. But winning would mean months of stress, legal fees she couldn't really afford, and a reputation as a troublemaker that would follow her to every future interview. And even if she won, even if she forced NeuroSpark to keep her or pay a settlement, she'd still be 53 years old in an industry that worshipped youth. The sun was starting to set over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Beck watched a heron pick its way along the shoreline, patient and deliberate. She thought about Emily, about the life she'd built after the divorce, about what she actually wanted from the next chapter of her career. Maybe NeuroSpark wasn't worth fighting for. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus, hey, heard about the meeting with David. That's bullshit. I'm sorry if there's anything I can do." Beck typed back, "Thanks, I appreciate it." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "For what it's worth, you're the best engineer on the team. Everyone knows it." Then why didn't anyone say that to David? The 3 dots appeared and stayed there for a long time before disappearing without a response. Beck drove home as the sun set, and when she got there, she opened her laptop and started looking at job postings. Not on LinkedIn. Those were all filtered by algorithms that screened out anyone with too much experience or too large a salary history. She looked at company websites directly, at startups in Austin and beyond, at mid-sized companies, and even a few enterprises. She spent 3 hours tailoring her resume, removing anything that dated her, emphasizing recent technologies, adding keywords from job descriptions. She uploaded new applications to 7 companies, all of them long shots. Then she opened her email and composed a message to David. "David, I've given careful thought to our conversation today. After reflection, I don't believe the technical documentation role is the right fit for my skills or career goals. I appreciate the opportunity to have worked at NeuroSpark, but I think it's best if we part ways. I'm prepared to give 2 weeks' notice to ensure a smooth transition of my current projects. Best regards, Rebecca Morrison." She read it 5 times, finger hovering over the send button. Once she sent it, there was no taking it back. She'd be unemployed at 53, in an industry that would see her as obsolete, with no guarantee that any of those applications would lead anywhere. But staying meant accepting their definition of her value. It meant becoming invisible. Beck hit send. She slept better that night than she had in weeks. Thursday morning, she arrived at the office to find a reply from David already waiting. "Beck, I'm sorry to hear this, but I respect your decision. Let's plan for your last day to be Friday, December 20th. Please coordinate with Marcus on knowledge transfer. We'll process your final paycheck with the standard severance package. Best, David, 2 weeks." She had 2 weeks to wrap up her life at NeuroSpark and figure out what came next. Beck spent Thursday and Friday documenting everything she'd worked on, The hospital integration, the authentication fixes, the security vulnerabilities, the database optimization. She wrote detailed guides for the monitoring system, the backup procedures, the recovery protocols, everything the team would need to maintain the systems after she was gone. Marcus stopped by her desk Friday afternoon. "This is really happening?" he asked. "Looks like it. I still think it's bullshit. You shouldn't have to leave." Beck looked up at him. "Then why didn't you fight for me? When David asked the team about me, when someone said I was condescending, why didn't you push back?" Marcus had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't know what to say. I mean, some of it was true, wasn't it? You do sometimes make people feel like they don't know what they're doing." "Because they don't," Beck said quietly. "Marcus, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. When I correct someone's code or suggest a better approach, it's not condescension. It's expertise. And the fact that you can't tell the difference is exactly why I'm leaving." She packed up her desk in a cardboard box, her photos of Emily, her favorite coffee mug, the small, succulent plant that had somehow survived 3 months in the office. 28 years of career experience, reduced to a box that fit in her car trunk. Saturday morning, she drove to San Marcos to pick up Emily. She debated whether to tell her daughter about the job situation, but Emily took one look at her face and knew. What happened? Beck told her the whole story over breakfast at their favorite Vietnamese restaurant, the missed credit, the condescension accusation, David's offer, her resignation. Emily listened with increasing fury. "That's age discrimination," she said. "You could sue them." "I could. I won't." "Why not?" "Because I'm tired, honey. Tired of fighting to be seen. Tired of proving myself over and over. Tired of working twice as hard for half the recognition. I'd rather put that energy into finding something better." What if there isn't something better? Beck had been thinking about that question all week. Then I'll create it. Over the next 2 weeks, Beck finished her knowledge transfer and said quiet goodbyes to the few people at Neurospark she'd actually connected with. Tyler took her to lunch and apologized for not speaking up. Sarah gave her a handwritten card. Marcus offered to be a reference, which felt both genuine and inadequate. On December 20th, her last day, Beck walked out of the Neurospark office at 5:00 p.m. with her box of belongings and her laptop bag. She didn't feel sad. She felt lighter. Christmas came and went. Emily came home for winter break, and they spent a week cooking together, watching movies, driving out to Fredericksburg to see the lights. Beck didn't talk about job hunting, and Emily didn't ask. But in the quiet hours when Emily was asleep, Beck worked. She'd started to notice something in her job search. Dozens of companies needed exactly what she was good at. They needed someone to rescue failing systems, document legacy code, mentor junior developers, prevent disasters before they happened. But they didn't want to hire someone full-time because that was expensive and required admitting they had problems. What they needed was a consultant. Beck spent January building a website and a service offering. She called her business Morrison Technical Services. Nothing fancy, nothing that tried to hide what she was. She offered 3 things: crisis response for failing systems, technical debt remediation, and knowledge transfer for engineering teams. Her rates were competitive but not cheap. Her portfolio included every major crisis she'd solved at Neurospark, properly credited this time. She sent the website to Marcus with a short note. "If Neurospark ever needs help with a crisis, let me know." His reply came 2 hours later. "Bookmarking this for later. We'll definitely need it." Beck got her first client in February, a medical software company in Houston whose database architecture was collapsing under load. They needed someone who could diagnose the problem fast and fix it remotely. Beck did it in a week. They paid her the equivalent of 2 months' salary at Neurospark. Her second client came through a referral from the first, A logistics company in Dallas, legacy integration nightmare. Nobody could figure out the codebase. Beck spent 3 weeks documenting and refactoring. The client was so impressed, they hired her to train their development team. By April, Beck had more work than she could handle. She raised her rates. Clients kept hiring her. In June, she got an email from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "Referred by Tyler Chen, NeuroSpark." Beck opened it carefully. "Ms. Morrison, my name is Jennifer Patel, and I'm the CTO of a healthcare tech startup in Boston. Tyler Chen worked with you briefly and gave me your information. We're dealing with a critical system stability issue that's threatening our next funding round. We need someone with deep expertise who can work fast. Would you be available for a consultation call this week?" Best, Jennifer Beck smiled and started typing a response. The Boston project turned out to be her biggest yet, a 3-month engagement that paid more than her entire year's salary at NeuroSpark. Jennifer was in her 40s, a former engineer herself, and the first person in months who treated Beck like a peer rather than a relic. They worked well together, trading war stories and debugging strategies over Zoom calls that often ran past midnight. "Why did you leave corporate?" Jennifer asked during one of their late-night sessions. Beck told her the story. Jennifer listened without interrupting. "I'm not surprised," Jennifer said finally. "Tech has a problem with anyone who doesn't fit the founder archetype. Young male, preferably college dropout with a hoodie. It's exhausting." "Did you face similar issues?" "Different issues. I'm a woman of color who's over 40. I hit the ceiling at my last company and realized I'd either have to shrink myself to fit their expectations or build something new." She paused. "That's why I like working with consultants like you. You've survived long enough to know what actually matters." Beck thought about that conversation for days afterward. She'd spent so much energy trying to fit into spaces that didn't want her, trying to prove her value to people who'd already decided she didn't have any. But Jennifer was right. The real power was in building something new. In August, Emily graduated early and moved back to Austin. She'd majored in economics but was struggling to find a job that excited her. "Everything feels so corporate and soulless," she complained over dinner one night. "I don't want to spend 40 years in a cubicle." "You don't have to," Beck said. "There are other options." "Like what?" Beck hesitated, then said, "Like working for yourself." Emily looked interested. "You mean like freelancing or starting a business?" "I've been thinking. I'm turning away clients because I don't have time. I need help with scheduling, client communications, basic project management, and you need a job, so you're offering me a position." "I'm offering you a partnership. Not right away, you'd start as my operations manager. But if this keeps growing, we could build something real. Morrison Technical Services could become Morrison & Morrison." Emily's eyes lit up. Seriously, I can't promise it'll be easy or stable, but it'll be ours." They started working together in September. Emily handled client intake, scheduling, invoicing, and all the business operations Beck had been juggling badly. She set up proper systems, built a client database, started tracking metrics. Within 3 months, they doubled their client capacity. In November, exactly 1 year after the night she'd fixed NeuroSpark's authentication crisis, Beck got another email from Marcus. "Beck, long time. Hope you're doing well. We're having a major system failure. Authentication is cascading into database locks. Everything's crashing. Does this sound familiar? David asked me to reach out. Would you be available for emergency consulting? Our current team can't figure it out. We'll pay your standard emergency rate." Marcus Beck read the email twice. Then she checked her rate sheet. Emergency consulting was $500 per hour with a 4-hour minimum. She typed back, "Available tonight. Send me remote access credentials." Emily looked over her shoulder. "Is that NeuroSpark?" "Yep. Are you going to help them? For $2,000? "Absolutely." Beck logged into NeuroSpark systems at 9:00 p.m. and found the same cascading failure pattern she'd fixed a year ago. They'd apparently introduced the exact same bug in a new microservice. She fixed it in 45 minutes, documented the solution, and sent Marcus a bill for the minimum 4 hours. She never heard back from David, but Marcus sent her a message the next morning. "You're a lifesaver again. I'll make sure you're on our preferred vendor list." Beck added NeuroSpark to her client portfolio and moved on. By December, Morrison & Morrison had 15 regular clients and a waiting list. Beck hired 2 contract developers to help with overflow work, both women over 40 who'd been downsized from corporate jobs. Emily started developing a workshop series on technical debt management that they could license to companies. On Christmas Eve, Beck and Emily sat on the balcony of Beck's apartment, drinking wine and watching the Austin skyline light up. "I've been thinking," Emily said. "We should get a real office, maybe near downtown, something professional." "We could," Beck said, "but that feels very start-up-y. Do we really need the overhead?" "No, but it would be nice to have a space that's ours. Not your apartment or my bedroom. A place where we're building something real." Beck smiled. "Okay, let's do it. In the new year." They clinked glasses as the city lights twinkled below them. Beck thought about where she'd been a year ago, sitting in NeuroSpark's conference room, invisible and undervalued, fixing problems that no one would credit her for. She thought about David's office, the condescension, the careful corporate language designed to make her feel small. She thought about how they'd been wrong. Her phone buzzed. Another client email, another system failure, another company that needed someone with her specific expertise. Beck skimmed it quickly. Financial services company in Seattle, legacy integration disaster, urgent timeline. "Another one?" Emily asked. "Yeah. This one looks complicated. Probably a 3-week engagement. Want me to set up the intake call?" "Please." Emily pulled out her laptop and started scheduling, while Beck watched the city lights and thought about the strange, winding path that had brought her here. She'd been laid off, sidelined, dismissed, and underestimated. She'd saved companies that wouldn't credit her work. She'd spent decades proving her value to people who'd never seen it. And in the end, none of that mattered anymore. She'd built something new, something that was hers, something that couldn't be taken away by executives who valued youth over expertise, or by systems designed to make experienced workers invisible. Beck finished her wine and went inside to start reading about the Seattle project. She had work to do, clients who needed her, and a business to build. She was 54 years old, and she was just getting started.